Okay, 67b. Samach Zayin Amud Beis. Yesterday we left off with Boy Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef has a question. So we're finishing off the parak of Elitratus.
Is he the blind one? Is he blind? Is that the one who was blind?
Yes, Rabbi Yosef was blind. Rabbi Yosef forgot his learning. Abaya would remind him. Okay. We're talking about insects or organisms that were inside a fruit. And we had a machlekes. If it's in the fruit while it's attached to the tree, is that considered on the ground because it's attached to the tree? So we said definitely if it's off the tree and it begins in the fruit, then that's not a problem. The question is it considered on the ground when it's attached to the tree? And that we had two opinions here. Rabbi Yosef says, Boy Rabbi Yosef, Pirsha Umeisa Mahu. It gets wormy once it's removed from the tree, and then it leaves the fruit, but it never actually crawls on the ground. So the pasuk that tells us that it becomes treif is sheretz ha-sheretz al-aretz. That sheretz means to creep. It creeps or wiggles on the ground. It never wiggled on the ground because right when it left the fruit, it died. So yes, it's on the ground, but it never creeped on the ground. Miktsasamahu. Do we say that if part of it went on the ground, but not all of it, is that also considered that it's on the ground? La'avira ilamahu. This is very interesting. Let's say it left the fruit, but before it hit the ground, the person caught it in his mouth. So it never really touched the ground, but it did go. If he wouldn't have caught it, it would have hit the ground. So if we say that leaving the fruit and it dies is mutter, why? Because it never crawled on the ground. If it was on the ground dead, but it never crawled on the ground. So now, if we say that that's mutter, so now we have another question. Let's say it never crawls on the ground, but it would have crawled on the ground because it's still alive, but he just caught it in his mouth. Notice there's the potential for it to crawl on the ground. What's going to be the din here? The Gemara says, Teiku. These are all questions. Obviously, we're going to have to be strict, my friends. We're not going to be able to eat these bugs.
In the meantime, don't eat worms.
Okay.
You walk into it and you catch them as they fall.
That's right. I remember I was walking with a friend in the park once. It was on Shabbos. And there were these gnats that were there. So I was going like this. He says, no, you can't go like that. It's muktzah.
Why?
Because if you touch it, it's muktzah. This is what do you have to do? I don't know what you're allowed to do. I stop breathing. I don't know. Sometimes over here, like Shalashu this time. Sometimes it's not.
But you can. They have sitter shratzim. They bother you. You can even kill them on Shabbos.
You're talking about kinam.
Not just killing, they have other shratzim. מה זה כמו יתושים שמזיקים לאדם או...
Oh, because of danger? You're allowed to kill it?
You can on Shabbos. It's not a problem. According to Ari, you're not cannot להרוג בריאה אסור בכלל.
I don't know if you're allowed to kill it on Shabbos. Maybe on Yom Tov you're allowed to kill it because Shchitas mutter. Anyway, on Yom Tov. Maybe on Yom Tov you're allowed to kill it. I don't know. That's a machlekes. Okay, Boy Ravashi. Now Ravashi has a question. So we jumped down a few generations here from Rabbi Yosef, who was here. Rabbi Yosef was the first questions. Ravashi is going to finish off with some more questions. So that's. He says, Legag Tamara Mahu. It was inside a date, and it crawled out of the date. Now it's outside the date. Is that considered that it's on the ground? Oh, beautiful. Untouched.
But don't leave it untouched.
Legagarinasamahu. Rashi over here points out, he says, that all of these insects, they start off in the pit. I'm a little surprised, but that's what Rashi says. So if we say that if it crawls out of the fruit to the outside, it's considered that it's already on the ground. What about if it crawls out of the pit, outside the pit, but it's still in the fruit? Is that considered on the ground? That's an interesting one. Okay, and now we say mitmar l'tmara. Let's say it crawls from one fruit, from one date to another date. Is this other date considered on the ground?
Yeah.
You see, in its own, if it moves in the date itself, that shouldn't be a problem. Okay, all of this is a teku. Amar Rav Sheshes Breder Ravidi Kukiani Asiri. Rav Sheshes, the son of Ravidi, says, let's see if we have this on the chart.
What did Rav Ashi add to this conversation?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good question. The questions before were all about ear. Well, it was all about the ear.
Right.
That's Rav Sheshes, but I don't know if that's Rav Sheshes Breder Ravidi. I'm not sure. Rav Ashi is saying in the fruit itself.
I never didn't provide an answer or anything.
Right.
So we have
Right. I hear. That's a good point. Okay, I'm familiar with Kukiani from the Gemara Brachas. The Gemara Brachas says that if someone eats barley flour, the Gemara discusses what bracha you would make on barley flour, toasted barley flour, and it says that barley flour causes intestinal worms, and it causes it. It says kukiani. The term for intestinal worms is kukiani. Anyway, kukiani asiri. Intestinal worms, obviously not humans' intestinal worms. We're talking about worms that are in an animal, that they're. Let's say a person's eating liver or the lung, and these worms are inside the flesh. So it's usher. Is that supposed to be doing that? My timer. What's the reason? Me'al masa. It's coming from outside. It's not coming from inside. It's not coming from inside the animal. The animal is taking these worms from the outside, and it's growing in the animal. Maskefla Ravashi. If Ravashi asks the question, Imeyal masu, if these worms are coming from the outside, l'shtachu derech beisarei. So why aren't they found in the digestive tract? Ikadamri, which means Ravashi holds that they're not from the outside. That's the point of his question. Ikadamri, there are those that say Amar Rav Shisha Breder Avidi Kukiani Shari. Some say exactly the opposite. That kukiani, these worms, which I called intestinal worms, but they're worms that are in the flesh of the different parts of the animal, these are permissible. Exactly the opposite. My taima, what's the reason? Minei gavli, they grow from the flesh itself. This is the old spontaneous generation, that it comes from the meat itself, turns into these worms.
I know we not eat pig, but if you take a pig, put it in the sun, the worms will come with it right away. It will not take 3 hours, and worms will come out of the meat.
Wow.
Is the larvae in the meat? Start?
No,
They just hatch out.
I didn't eat one, but I saw.
I mean, tell me.
Wow.
Where from? Meat?
If you take a meat of ham or pig, whatever you call it, put it in the sun, fresh, you'll see worm coming out of it. 2-3 hours, they'll come. Yeah.
Amar Ravashi. Now, Ravashi, if you remember, in the first version of this Gemara said, it was telling Rav Shisha Breder Avidi, why are you saying that kukiani, these worms are usher? They're not coming from the outside. Now we have the new version here. Kukiani is actually permissible. What's Ravashi's comment? Rashi says, pshita, that's obvious that they're permissible. Because if they came from outside, then they would have been found in the digestive tract. V'hilchasa, what is the halacha? Kukiani asiri. These worms are aser. My taima. Minim nayim. The reason why they're aser is because when the animal's sleeping, these worms crawl in through the nose, which means they're coming from outside. Coming from outside, they end up inside the inner organs, and the person
Like some fish,
having some meat.
Some fish have tolaim.
Oh, that's what we're going to get to in a minute. Very good. Very good. Darn.
Perhaps I need to sit over there. Not to change.
No, it's yours happen to be smart even without sitting here. Darni the Bisra Asiri. This means the worms that are under the skin, that are in between the skin and the flesh, or in the flesh itself. It means after they skin the animal, they see over there the worms. This is probably what you're referring to with the pig.
Could be,
The kavri sharian. However, in the fish, it's permissible. Taisvis over here mentions, he says that when it says kukiani, asiri, he says, where are these kukiani? So he says, Rashi says the way we were learning, the Rashi says that they're in the liver or in the lungs.
you don't have picture. What is
Later on, the Gemara is going to bring a brisa that's going to say that worms that are in the flesh are prohibited. So, how is there one opinion here that says kukiani ashari when you have a brisa that says that it's prohibited? So Rabbeinu Tamlin's different. He says that the kukiani is actually in the fish. He says, what does it mean when it's sleeping? It goes through the nose. He says we find this by fish. He brings a Gemara with Rabbi Barbachana about a fish that was sleeping. Okay.
Fish don't sleep, although they sleep with their eyes open.
No, you're talking about
Yeah.
big fish.
And actually in that story, there was some sort of insect that went into the fish's nose or something. Okay. So whatever the case is, we have a machlekes here. Yeah, maybe that's what it means.
This is nose.
No, it says usyei, which
It's nemim.
I don't know.
It's the ears.
Um,
There's nemim.
Gills?
Huh?
Gills, maybe?
Yeah, whatever.
Could
Nemim
be.
is in Hebrew. Gills in English.
Whatever the case is, we have a machlekes here. What's going to be the halacha by fish, by the worms in fish? Is the halacha of kukiani? Is that kukiani according to Tosfos, or is the fish different? Over here we say the kavri sharian. So Amar le Ravina le'eme. Ravina says to his mother, Evlo livane echel. Don't show it to me and I'll eat it. That means keep it covered up, put a thick sauce on it or something. As long as I don't see it, I'm fine with it. Apparently this is with the fish. Because if he would see it, maybe he would be disgusted. And then we have another problem. What's the other problem is baltashaktu. You can't eat something that's disgusting to you. So if you don't see it, then you're going to be avoiding that. Amle Rav Mesharshia Breder Ravachla Ravina. Rav Mesharshia, the son of Ravacha, says to Ravina. Yeah, I don't see it here either. Well, if you see a Ravacha, then maybe that could help us. See, Ravacha is here on the side.
Right.
So maybe Rav Mesharshia's son is telling to Ravina. Ravacha, Rav Mesharshia, the Ravacha's son, would be down here. Would be down here.
Just
Talking
right
to Ravina, possibly. I don't know if he's there when Ravina told this to his mother. That's what it sounds like, that he happened to be in the house. And Ravina tells his mother, I'll eat it. Maishnami hadatanya. What is the difference from what it says in the Brisa? This is the Brisa that we quoted. Vesnivlasam tishaktsu, that their carcass is disgusting. L'rabes es hadranim shebe behema. This is coming to include the worms that are inside the flesh or underneath the skin in an animal. And now you're saying that the worms in the fish you're going to eat. You told your mother you're going to eat it. What's the difference from in the worms in the animal that we learned from a pasuk that it's aser? Ravina says 1 second. You're making a comparison. It's not a perfect comparison because behema b'shchita hu de mishtarya. It's very interesting. An animal when it's shechted becomes kosher. You shecht it, it becomes kosher. V'hani, these bugs that are inside, midloika mahani l'shchita. The shchita doesn't help it. You're shechting an animal, but the shchita doesn't make the insects kosher. B'Sirayah kaiman, they remain forbidden. Aval dagim, but fish don't need shchita. Ba'asifa ba'alma mishtaya. With just gathering them, just catching them itself, they're permissible. V'hani kika gavlan be'ter kagavlan. So these are growing in a permissible way, because it doesn't require shchita here. You see, Rashi points out one point that clarifies this. When you shecht an animal, which we're going to learn later today in the new parak, if there's a fetus inside the animal, the fetus doesn't require shchita. And we learn that from a pasuk. So Rashi says it's only the fetus that doesn't require shchita. But if there would be insects inside, those are not permissible. The shchita never helped those insects. So therefore, when we talk about the hadrani, which is the worms that are inside the animal, there was no shchita that permitted them. However, in the fish, which doesn't require shchita, the worms in the fish are permissible. It's a little bit unclear, because that's my issue here. My issue was shchita. My issue wasn't shchita. My issue was worms.
Worms, yes.
But he's making it that the shchita never allowed it. Guess what he's saying is that the worms are not considered part of the meat, so that the permissibility of the meat itself, which is permissible, never permitted the worms that are there. However, in the fish, I didn't need to do an act to make the fish permissible, and so therefore the worms were permissible without any action. That's something along those lines. Anyway. Okay. Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis taught in the Brisa. Haylech al gachain, anything that it goes on its what's the term?
Belly?
On its belly. Zen nachash. This is the snake, which is forbidden. When it says kol haylech al gachain, anything that goes on its belly, the rabbi says shilshul. This is referring to the earthworm, the verma posting, right?
When we said before that the fish are permitted just by gathering them, doesn't need shechita. So does that mean if a fish came to you and you didn't gather it, it's not kosher?
I'm not sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
'Cause
I know what
if
you're saying.
it's
If you
gathering,
can eat it while it's in the water,
yeah. Like what if you were just swimming around and the fish came in and
right?
you
It was
didn't
still
gather
alive. Is that I'm not sure. I remember somewhere a discussion if there's Ever Menachai by fish. I remember it.
כל הדבר יוצא מתוך איפה שהוא חי. So when he got out of the waters, it's נחשב כמת.
Right.
Automatically.
No, but he's not. Let's say you eat it while it's alive.
You can eat it alive. It's not a problem.
It says over here that it's
Thank
permitted
you,
by
Rabbi.
Sushi,
it's permitted by gathering
Sushi,
them,
yeah.
and they're not included in Abram Menachai.
Example,
It sounds like because of the gathering.
Yeah.
example like
Yeah,
tuna.
or maybe it's not included in Ever Menachai.
Example tuna. A lot of times they
I
jump
don't
to
know.
the
I'm
boat.
not sure. I remember a Taisvis somewhere about this, and so the earthworm is also forbidden, and also what's similar to the earthworms. Al arba, anything that goes on four. Ze akrav, this is the scorpion. In kol haylech al arba, kol haylech l'rabes esa chipushis. This is including the beetle. V'sadayim l'chipushis, and anything that's similar to the beetle. Marbe raglayim, anything with many feet. What is this? Zenadal, this is the centipede. Rashi says, look at that Rashi. Meya raglayim kardanlai. 100 feet it's called. A centipede. Ad kol, this the kol that's in the pasuk. L'rabis esadayma v'esadayma l'dayma. It's including anything that's similar to it and anything that's similar to what's similar to it. There's also a millipede, right? There is a millipede.
Elephant.
The Ramah says that it's forbidden.
Tell me,
Due
what's,
about the shaksu, and Mishnah Torah says it's permitted.
what referring to what? The worms in the fish?
No, the live fish.
Oh, to eat live fish?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Where's the Ramah?
The Ramah
Pei Gimel.
The more you're there,
What, 83?
13.1.
In back in the beginning. Okay.
Wait, what was it? Rama and who else? Rama?
Mishnah Torah, yeah.
Rama.
That's
So you
permitted.
allowed to eat live fish or not?
The Ramah says no, and the Rambam says yes.
Better
Right?
spit it out. Spit it out. The fish.
Rav Avad Yosef's son was in Miami, so he spoke. He said that his Rosh Hashiva told him. He asked his Rosh Hashiva, "Where's the halachas of fish in Shulchan Aruch?" So he told him it's chapter 83. He says, "If you ever forget this, just remember gefilte fish. Gefilte fish is the Rosh Hashiva's Pei Gimel." Just very funny for a Sephardi to discuss. They don't have gefilte fish.
Because most of them learn the Litaim Yeshivot. Most of them.
Listen, what?
Most of the Sfaradim learn in Litvik Yeshivas. Most of them.
Tanya.
Hadatim.
Not get into that. Tanya was taught in a brayta. Rabbi Yossi ben Dermiskis Omer. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Dermiskis, says, "Levyasan dag tarhu." The levyasan is a kosher fish. Shneimar gava fikim meganim. Maginim. Its pride is its shield. Shield sounds like the scales, right? Tachtav chadudei choresh. Under it is the sharpest shards of pottery. Afiki meganim, when it talks about its shields, elo kaskasim shabai. This is the scales. Tachtav chadudei choresh elo snapirim shapirefem. It's sharp. It's sharp like the the pottery shards. This is the fins with which it swims with. It means it has fins and scales. Return to Elutrapus. Okay, we have a new paragraph.
A question.
Yeah.
Is the Leviathan of today that you see Leviathan, is it kosher or is not?
What is the Leviathan? Is that, in modern Hebrew, there's a fish called Leviathan?
Yeah.
What is that? What fish is that?
It's a whale.
Well,
A whale.
Yeah.
We don't eat whale.
You have in the
Does a
Pacific
whale have
Ocean, you have,
scales?
I don't know, that's what I'm asking.
It says no. It says, is a whale even a fish?
Oh boy, we need a new. There's probably one in there, and there's probably one in there, and then we'll have to go downstairs. To get the other one. You want to check downstairs?
Fly.
Way in the back.
It has
Yeah, on the shelf. I don't know if it's there, but
Shouldn't that be a...
unless you want to. We have other Gemaras. We have other Gemaras. Yeah, on the bottom, the second to the last one.
You have to have a fishing boats to make sure that the tunas don't jump over. You have to have a mashgiach on every fishing boat to keep the fish.
Okay, we have enough. Yeah. Okay, get to start a new parak.
Stamp on the tuna can.
Samaches. Behema hamak shalelid. An animal that's having difficulty giving birth. Female animal that's having difficulty giving birth. V'haitziyu uberes yadai. And the fetus sticks out its arm, its forearm or its leg. V'hechzirei. But then it brings it back in. Mutter ba'achila. It's permissible to eat it. Now, the difficulty with this Mishnah is the pronoun that you're allowed to eat it. It doesn't say what you're allowed to eat. Are you allowed to eat the arm, or are you allowed to eat the uber, the fetus? That's going to be the entire page of Gemara discussing that vague, the ambiguous pronoun mutter ba'achila. You're going to have a machlekes about this. This phrase of the Mishnah is called the Reisha. Let's see the Seifa. Although there's the end of the Mishnah, which is the end of the Mishnah, but in our Gemara we're going to discuss just the first two clauses as the Reisha and Seifa. Haitziya es Reisha. Let's say it sticks out its head. Afal pishech zirei. Even though it brings the head back in, In other words, it was born already, the head, but then the head goes back in. Hareza ki yalad, that's already like it was given birth. Okay, and then the introduction to this is that if you shecht an animal and there's a fetus inside, that you're allowed to eat the fetus. That won't apply to an animal that already was born, even though it's still inside. Even though it's still inside, it doesn't help. That's only if it's inside and it wasn't born. Because once it's born, it needs its own shechita. And if it's alive, it needs its own shechita. And if it's dead, then it's an avela, because it's considered a separate entity. Okay, now this the second part of this Mishnah. Chaytech mi'uber shebemeyahu. We mentioned this once before. If someone does a surgery in utero, does some sort of sticks his hand inside and he cuts from the fetus, cuts something off, and he leaves it inside, and then the animal gets shechted, it's mutter ba'achila. You're allowed to eat that. It's hanging around inside the animal, it's mutter. Minat chala minat klayas. Could have thought that maybe if someone sticks his hand inside and he does a surgery, he cuts a little bit off the spleen or off the kidneys, not of the fetus, of the mother, or of any animal, and leaves it inside, and then they do a shechita. That's asur ba'achila. That you're not allowed to eat. Zak, why is it asur? It's Ever Menachai, or Basar Menachai. Zeh haklal, this is the rule, davar gufa asur, anything that's from the body is asur. She'ena gufa, if it's not from the body, it's from the uber, it's from the fetus, that's mutter. Okay.
Why you cannot eat the klayot and the tchol?
Because it was cut off while the animal was still alive.
So it's when you become trefa.
Well, here we're using an example of something that doesn't make the animal a trefa. The animal is still kosher because we learned before that if you cut off a piece of the heart or a piece of the lung or something, then the animal's a trefa, then you can't eat the whole animal. If you cut off a piece of the spleen, depending on which part, or right, there was a thicker part or something and a thinner part. If you cut off a piece of the spleen in a place that the animal is still kosher, it's not a trefa. So you can eat the animal, but what about that piece of the spleen that's inside? I shechted an animal, and inside there was a separate piece of meat was inside, already cut off. It says that you can't eat. That was cut off while the animal was alive. Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav. This is Rav Yehuda in the center, and he's saying in the name of Rav. Rav was his first teacher.
Before you go on, I have a question. Yeah. Rashi here says all this is at the time of Shechita. Right? The first Rashi.
First Rashi, yeah. Why does Rashi have to say that? What would happen is that you see the animal is giving birth,
right,
and it's having difficulty giving birth. Yeah. So you're worried that you're going to lose the mother. So what you do is you rush and you shech the mother, so that now that would be the practical scenario, but it's also relevant because it doesn't have to be mamash b'shas shchita, but this is the scenario where it sticks it out and brings it right back in and you shecht it, or it sticks it out. I was going to see in the brayso, it doesn't bring it back in. You see, what the Gemara is going to discuss here, if you wait a minute for the Gemara, you'll see an interesting point, because we're talking about sticking it out and bringing it back in, and you're allowed to eat it. Mm-hmm. We don't say what you're allowed to eat. So,
but is the purpose of to save the ubar, or the purpose of the shechita is just for to eat the animal?
Well, the concern here is that the mother is giving birth.
Yes.
It's about to die, because it's makasha lelet. So you want to salvage the meat of the mother.
Okay. That's what...
Right, it's not considered a treifa.
No, not yet.
We never mentioned Mekasha Leiled in Hilchas Treifas, but it's in labor and there's.
Why the mother is going to die?
Well, during birth, there's dangers.
Okay.
The Gemara discusses if someone buys an animal, if it gave birth once already, there's more chance of survival when it gives birth the second time, the first time is the most dangerous. The first child is the most dangerous. So there's a discussion, if you buy an animal from a non-Jew, can you trust him to say that it already gave birth once, and when it gives birth, the animal that's born is not a bachar? Follow? Because he wants to sell it for a higher price, saying that it gave birth already, that it doesn't have that risk of dying in labor the first time. And the question is, can you trust the non-Jew if he has also a benefit from it? Maybe he wants to. Okay. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Ve'ever atzma yaser. We said if it sticks out its arm and brings it back in, it's mutter, but not the limb. The limb is aser. So what does it mean? It's mutter. The rest of the animal. The rest of the fetus is mutter. But that limb that went out is not mutter.
Who do you cut out?
You'd have to cut it off. You have to cut it off. The shechita of the mother doesn't permit it, and the child, the fetus, that doesn't need shechita.
Right.
It won't permit it. You're gonna have to cut it off. We'll see what it is.
You'd have to do shechita on the baby.
No, the shechita of the baby isn't going to permit it because the baby doesn't need shechita. It doesn't have any status, any permissibility.
You're Kohen, you need to know these things. Soon you're going to serve us.
You just need to know what to eat.
Barbecue.
Remember, they asked me in school a trick question. They said if you shech the korban Pesach and inside you find a fetus, so is the fetus considered a korban or not? And then we were thinking, no, it shouldn't be. If it doesn't need shechita, this and that. And then the real answer was a korban Pesach is a male animal. It's sort of like the chicken. Which
You
side
already
does the egg
started
fall?
working my head, Rabbi.
Okay, the rooster, right? My timer. What's the reason for this? Why is that limb itself aser? The Amar Kra, the pasuk says, "Basar basar the treif alei sechelav." The Gemara learns a very interesting thing from this. It says any meat that's in the field, torn, you can't eat it. The Gemara learns that kivan sheyatza basar chutz lemechitzasei nesar. Basada means like out in the field. The Gemara stops there, like this. Basar basada, treifa. That's considered a treifa. Has the same halachas as a treifa. Meat in the field, it's a treifa. Why is it a treifa? Well, it has this rule like this, that anything that has a certain area, confined to a certain area, if it leaves that limitation, it becomes treifa. What's an example for that?
It has nothing to do with the meat itself that's sitting there in the field. That it's treif. It has to do with the proximity.
There's some sort of limit on this meat. If it leaves